Good to see you in large numbers, and I will try my best to learn from the panelists on how India is building global supply chain, how are they adding from their own company. But I just wanted to ask you one thing before I just begin. How many of you shop from West Side? Large numbers, any discount? So I think that's a interesting brand. So if you want any discount after the session, you know whom to catch. So you, yeah, Zudio also, yes, I forgot that. I often go to West Side, so I said about West Side. Anyone here who goes to Zudio? I think half the people, you should be happy with us. That the real feedback.
Amol,
so, yes.
Maybe another question I can ask
Sure.
the audience. Do you know Henkel? And okay, can you tell me how many of you are using Henkel products on a day-to-day basis?
There are still few numbers consumer brands.
Yes, and this is because a lot of our products which we are producing and selling are not visible. But I can tell you, each one of you are using Henkel products, adhesives, at least 25 products on a day-to-day basis. That is because we are supplying to almost all the industries. For example, your shoes have adhesives, your cars, your mobiles, your television, aeroplane, chips pocket, anything and everything which has a certain adhesive component required is supplied by us, and we are mainly into the industrial adhesives. I thought I'll just give an introduction because this is a very interesting insight.
No, fantastic. I think it's a great opportunity, Krishna, that you... you also want to say something, Raju? I mean, you can say about the BFSI tech is being used by...
Thank you, Atul. I'm feeling the complex. I should have come with some brands and stickers over here. But I'll let you do the introduction. Of course, we'll keep talking.
Sure. So that was good to begin with. So I think one of the biggest theme of today's world, specifically when you look at India as a growing economy, how to put sharp focus on, Bharat, and specifically how to scale up the manufacturing. And my question to you, I will start with you, Rajeev, and then we'll, forward it to you. In a globalized world now, tariff has become a big problem. And the biggest challenge is everything is uncertain, right? So one, as a tech player, how do you see this uncertainty? And how do you see that manufacturing can take big benefit out of, tech?
It's an interesting one, Atul, and honestly, since last evening, we've seen some two major events, right? And you can imagine we're living in a world which is so volatile. Your heart can skip a beat, right? And then suddenly you get up in the morning and you realize, okay, there's another war that has just got initiated there. So we are indeed living in a very, very dynamic world there. And just to introduce L&T Technology Services, we're a company that provides engineering services to the largest customers across the globe, right? And when I talk about engineering services, we're into three segments: mobility, sustainability, and tech. So when you think mobility, the cars are designed by L&T Technology Services. I mean, pick a nice car that you may be traveling in, even software-defined vehicles, etc. If you talk about sustainability, designing of plants across the globe, and tech, you can be thinking about a lot of medical devices. You can think about designing of semiconductors. So a lot of work. Now, to come to your question, Atul, honestly, we've seen a very tough last year globally, if I were to say. We all know that US was struggling to come back in terms of growth and so on and so forth. I think they did brilliant to come back. Everyone entered CY25 with a lot of anticipation that there will be growth. Only that we realized that, yes, one gentleman had tariffs in mind, and then suddenly all plans went bust. So the fact that you've got a situation like tariffs, that impacts growth, right? You've got to start thinking about alternate models. What are you going to do? You are in a global environment, operating with customers, designing their cars, designing their planes. And because of the tariff situation, many of these customers depend. We're a global world, right? So none of the product actually is designed within a country. It's designed across different countries to bring it together. And if you talk about 25%, 50%, even 100% plus tariff means you're just, you're not in the market anymore to be able to sell your products. So fact is, the world today is going through a situation where they're trying to figure out how to manage their supply chain given the tariffs. I will also talk about this, and I happen to, meet a very, and I will not talk about the staff that I met, but this was organized by NASSCOM. It had a good representation from folks from US, right, who have representation into the government and provide a lot of advocacy that they tend to build through us. Fact is, even the US, let's say government or the officials or a lot of the residents there are not necessarily liking tariffs, right? Maybe a long response to what you asked for, but there's a lot of uncertainty that has evolved at this stage, which is also having to think, what do you do next? Where do you start to set your alternate supply chain? I'll take two examples, right? Because we design vehicles, and a lot of you may be reading that China suddenly stopped the distribution of rare earth minerals. And they're compelling for companies to buy batteries as opposed to the rare earth minerals, which then completely price you out because you can't use their batteries, it's expensive. What do you do, right? And you must have read, there's one auto OEM in India which has just stopped a line because they can't do any more EVs. What do you do in a situation like this? Second, I'll give you the story. I was talking to a managing director of a large chemicals business, and because I was coming here to talk about supply chain, I asked him a question, pertinent one, saying, how are you testing resilience in your supply chain? And his question was his response was interesting, saying, what we are doing is not just measuring the resilience of our supplier, we are also measuring the resilience of our supplier's supplier. So imagine as organizations, I'm sure the two gentlemen with me will have more to share, but you can suddenly run out of business if you've not managed the resilience, not necessarily efficiency, but the resilience of your supply chain. Yeah, Atul, back to you.
Yeah, that was meaningful one when sometime back you said that I was having a meeting, मुझे लगा मतलब आप कहीं ट्रम्प को तो मिलने नहीं गए, and you complained about the tariff. But that was meaningful one, Rajeev. Neeraj, let's talk about the supply chain, because you come from a segment where the supply chain is an integral part. So how are you, my basic simple question is, how are you building a strong seamless supply chain which is equivalent to global standards? And also, I'm seeing Zudio is being getting launched everywhere, right? So many shops are coming up with Zudio. West side के भी बहुत सारे आ रहे हैं. कभी ऐसा होता है कि West side का माल Zudio में गया और Zudio का West side में? How do you manage that?
Yeah. Okay. I was thinking of actually talking about Blue Star, because that's where I come from as well. And I have a few of my ex-colleagues from Blue Star sitting there in the audience. Well, now I think, Amol, the fact is that we are living in reasonably, certainly uncertain times. And a lot of what we've seen play out in the last few months, quarters, looks like it's here to stay. And it doesn't look like a flash in the pan situation where things will stabilize, things will settle down, and then probably normalcies will resume. So the new norm seems to be no norm. And this is not just from the context of any sector in specific. Generally, if you're talking about supply chains, and probably in some ways this started with COVID. And if you reflect what happened during COVID with the serious disruption in the supply lines, firstly involving the shipping lines, where it took a long while for that part to stabilize. So there are dependencies. The challenge we all have across businesses, across sectors, industries, I guess how we've all part of the globalization and interlinkages that got associated. We built dependencies. Now it could be dependencies on another country. It could be dependencies on a bunch of key suppliers, or in any manner involving either capacities, raw materials, components. It could be maybe efficiencies relating to how we are able to procure or source, and so on and so forth. Now, these dependencies is where when you get into a situation what we now are into, for example, relating to tariffs, which was your question, it does challenge the resilience of business model and how effectively risks are being managed or how risks have been visualized or imagined to begin with. So probably, my throwback on this question is that I think this is worth, firstly, I don't think there are some ready-made answers, but clearly an awareness or an acknowledgement that the supply chain disruptions are going to stay. And now as business people, business managers, how do we navigate? I guess the challenge is back with the business managers on how to navigate and without really causing too much of a disruption downstream. Difficult, but I guess it's a reality we all best. The sooner we acknowledge, the best it will be for us to now think of, okay, now, therefore, what are the solutions?
Interesting. Krishna, I also want you to add on, building a global supply chain. How are the Indian companies actually trying their best to build a supply chain which is equivalent to a global, and making investments and trying to make it as seamless as possible?
Yes, I think as he pointed out, since COVID times, I think the new normal is that we need to be ready for any kind of situation. So all the scenario buildings, all the different sensitivity analysis and how we are able to manage the top line and bottom line, I think is quite crucial. I would like to reflect upon two things, one from the local side and another from the global side. The local side, of course, as we speak for India and our business, we don't procure so much from US, so therefore the impact is less, although the numbers are not yet finalized. And we could also tell on a real-time basis the impact of all these changes. Why? Because from a infrastructure or from a tool perspective, we have globally invested in a tool called value chain steering. It's basically a tool which is capturing all the bill of materials, and there is a possibility to do a sensitivity analysis, meaning you say, okay, this is the change that is happening. So then that captures all the bill of material into the raw material, into the finished products, and finally into your sales, and say how much of this change is going to impact your profitability and how much is going to impact therefore your overall financials. So from that perspective, we are well prepared in the sense that we understand at least what is happening and how the changes are going to affect us. But also reflecting on your question in terms of how globally we think about, I think we are a German company, and there is clearly also a strategy of China plus one. So then there is increased focus on India in terms of building the supply chain and making sure that we also are following the customers, because they are also setting up their base in India, and therefore we are supplying to them. So this is also sometimes acts as an advantage, because all these tariff topics, if you have multiple locations from the global perspective, then you can decide and choose which is the best location to manufacture certain products and supply. So from that perspective, it is covered. Although it is a very dynamic situation, and again, as we discussed already, this is how we should be prepared going forward as well, because right from COVID it has accelerated and there is no normal day anymore. So we need to be well prepared based on all these different scenarios.
Sure. Noted, Krishna. What I will do is my next question to Neeraj, but I also want you to take a part into this discussion. And if you have any specific questions, be ready. After shooting my next question to Neeraj, I will come to you. Rajeev. Rajeev, you're providing, as a company, you're providing solutions to, a lot of companies, and I copied your, example of Tata Chemicals, the chemical company CFO that you met. The challenge that a lot of manufacturing companies that I see and they seek a solution is how to be cost effective, how to be cost competitive, how to compete with China, specifically in the manufacturing. So what is your thought there? What can basically, how can manufacturing CFOs be far more competitive? What needs to be done on that front? Because until and unless if that doesn't happen, they won't be able to build a strong supply chain.
So lots of questions within that, Amol, right? And I'll try my best to respond. See, because we do offer engineering services to a lot of our global companies, and many, of course, based in Europe and Germany, what you're seeing really is there is Industry 4.0 being adopted in a big way, right? So thinking about robotics, manufacturing, thinking about AI in supply chain, and there are enough examples, right? And I will cite this example. A lot of us know Airbus has significantly invested in India, right? Because they're trying to enhance supply chain, and that got disrupted during COVID times. Yeah. Now, for an Airbus to really come up with the plane, they need so many things to actually come together, and they use AI as a big, enhancer in terms of ensuring that all the parts required within the supply chain make it before they can really, assemble the entire plane together. Just as an example on technology. Another is digital twin. And digital twin is becoming so much of a reality, not necessarily only in a factory or a plant environment, but it'll become a reality in probably even a car for that matter, where you can monitor assembly lines, right? You can do remote monitoring of plants, you can do predictive maintenance, and you can do a lot of enhancements required. You're also seeing compute vision being deployed in big way in global facilities and plants and manufacturing zones. So think about, you used to be maybe a decade or two decades ago with these manuals where a workman would go onto the shop floor and have the instruction and then perform a particular task, right? That manual moved into digital. That digital now is becoming a lot more AI driven because that's all available, right? Through a voice command, one can really find what to do. A compute vision can enhance your ability to monitor quality of a product coming onto assembly line. So fact is, when we are advising many of our customers doing such rapid automation and transformation in their respective factories and plant, and I'm combining now that with China Plus One, today maybe for India to emerge, a lot of these technology upgrades, easier said than done, right? Because there is an investment that one has to commit for before you really see the, the output of what may come years from now. But honestly, it's about making these bets. And I think as CFOs, when we now start to think about the next decade, it'll be about bringing technologies and then combining human and technology to make sure that you're able to make the best of products out of India and that are recognized and that are, of course, inviting more and more brands to come into India, right? And we've got so many examples in the recent times. You've seen Apple, you've seen Airbus, you've seen Google, right? You've seen Foxconn. A lot of teething issues one can hear about, but fact is we have to go through that pain and we have to evolve to make it happen, right? So some of the thoughts there, Amol.
No, noted. I agree with you. So I will come to you because I don't want to take you at last, but in between. But quickly, Neeraj, I want you to add on this because global competitiveness is what we are talking about, and we are trying to build India as a manufacturing powerhouse. What is it that you as a CFO need, to become globally competitive, and how are you using technology, to become that, maybe IoT or AI, whatever?
Yeah, so I think one key focus area for most Indian companies, specifically your question is around manufacturing, is to consider R&D investments far more seriously. I guess we've for long we've relied upon technology transfers. We relied upon a tie-up or an overseas supplier keeping the key technology with them, and we just procure, and we're really good at that. But really speaking, unless the private sector starts to consider investing in R&D, in technology, I guess that will be the needle moving. And this example of rare earth magnets that we all keep hearing about, it's largely to do with those investments. And it's time, I guess now in India, the Indian ecosystem can afford to carve out capital allocation more towards innovation, R&D, including deployment of whether it is the digital or tech initiatives or a variation of that in whichever way to get better with the outcomes rather than having to depend a lot on an overseas supplier providing these to the Indian manufacturers.
Sure, I think technology has no alternative today. Anybody has any quick question here on this particular topic before I move to Krishna on my next question? So Krishna, I will, if there is any, please do let me know. So Krishna, Germany has been always the powerhouse, and when it comes to the manufacturing, if you compare, where are we lacking now? I mean, as we have been talking about Make in India, we have made some progress for sure, but we still not achieved our goal, and we are still far away from that. So if you want to speed up, if you want to accelerate our journey, what are the top lessons that you think specifically the manufacturing companies needs to adopt to become a global powerhouse?
Yes, I think one is to do with internal infrastructure, the other one is with the external infrastructure. So internal infrastructure, as he also pointed out, I think we have to really do a lot of investments in technology, in all the modern things. And this investment is costly. I mean, if you compare now China to India, definitely there is a big gap, and we have to take that efforts to really not take shortcuts, but really invest for the future. It might not give you returns immediately, but over a period of time, and we have seen already what we have done in last 3-4 years is already giving us returns and much better than the old technology. So we need to be a little bit patient, but for sure this is going to give us big results. That's internally. But of course the big factors, particularly when the multinational company from headquarters have to invest in India, then we also need a lot of support from the government, which is happening on the right side. For example, APA is something for the transfer pricing. We have had some delays, but finally that got concluded, so that was a big step. Also, from the perspective of one window clearance, I think there we can do a lot. I think in terms of bureaucracies, if that can be further improved, so that is going to help us. And apart from that, I think government is already investing a lot in the infrastructure, and this is more and more required, especially on the logistics and especially on the whole sustainability aspect. Then there we can also, because again, some of these multinational companies, particularly German companies, are really looking forward for big sustainability related initiatives happening in the country, and that becomes a USP. So therefore, those investments, which is rightfully already being done by the government, it can be increased, and we as a industry together work to get to the next league, then we can easily compete and become better in the lights of China, etc.
Yeah. Oh, certainly, I think that single window clearance is what everyone is talking about. And when you speak China, I think that was my next question. We partly discussed the global competitiveness and cost effectiveness, Raji, but my specific question again on China, and then I want Neeraj, you also to add. We have been talking a lot about China Plus and China strategy. I don't know whether there have any dedicated policies, but what I vaguely remember is the economic survey of 2025 spoke about how government should actually embrace China model and support Chinese FDI also. Unfortunately, those points were missing in the budget. But if India has to look at China Plus One and take benefit of China Plus One, one simple question that I have is, do you think India can achieve that scale? Because whenever we speak about China, China is far ahead, way ahead than India. As we are growing up now, do you think that India can ever achieve the scale of China?
So one simple answer to your simple question, undoubtedly. Right? And I say this with conviction. But you got to go back almost 20, 25 years. Right? China was also where we are today. Maybe there's a combination of things that needs to happen. I mean, you're talking about infra, right? And when you're talking about becoming, let's say, relevant to the globe, and many of the customers may want to see India as a supply chain hub. your infra makes such a big difference, right? You think about rail, you think about, road, you think about ports, you think about the convenience, right? You think about building concentrated zones with the technology that's available. All that is possible. And maybe I'll touch upon, the fact that, look, this will require a lot of public-private partnership to come along. And there's enough and more that one can think in terms of meeting the global supply chain, right? And fact is, the West doesn't have the talent today. You've got 1.5 million graduates every year in India. They don't have this, talent that's available to us. And sometimes we've seen probably in the yesteryears talent drain, right? Where a lot of talent is going overseas. Today it's happening the other way around. Yeah. So I think one, public-private partnership to build zones that can actually help us with products and facilities and whatnot. The second is, I think you touched upon it, the research and development initiatives need to really, really ramp up a lot, right? Now, if you pick any of the big brands globally, they may be spending close to 5 to 6% minimum of their revenues on research and development. I can place my bet, I don't think as Indian companies we do that, right? Now, that also may be the case because probably we're thinking more, efficiency factors as opposed to, building scale. But then there comes a part in terms of how does the government build policy and regulations that rewards R&D. And I don't know how many of you recall, but under the foreign trade policy of 2015, there was a benefit allowed for research and development. And that benefited a lot of companies that used to do engineering services or engineering work and offer as products and services globally. So there is an angle in terms of regulation that needs to come in to enhance so that there's enough, let's say, research and development activity that's occurring. The third is inclusivity. I mean, you think about, there's about 30% of the GDP that comes from MSMEs. That's a big, big set. Now, how do you really bring MSMEs into the fold? Now, the technologies that we're talking about really is not available to MSMEs. So you got to think the chain, right? You got to make sure that some of this becomes available in such a way that the MSMEs become, somewhere fueling into it. Yeah. So some thoughts, there's a lot that can be done. And we believe that, of course, you're seeing the infra come up, you're seeing the rail, road, all of these facilities come up. But I think it will need to be, I would say, hastened compared to where it has been in the past, because the opportunity is here and now. It is not going to be 5 years from now, it is here and now. And I'm sure we got to pick focus sectors where we want to be masters for the globe as opposed to being all over the place. Yeah. So some thoughts there.
Very, very interesting, Neeraj. Rajeev?
Yeah.
China plus one. Can we become China?
I think we should remain, as you said, Bharat, is my view, and establish our identity as India. Well, see, look, there are two sides to this entire equation. One part is, which comes quite naturally to us, that look, what is the government doing, what policy, what incentives, facilitation, and so on and so forth. My sense is there's been quite a bit of support and initiatives from the policy side. So if you look at the PLI, the production-linked incentives across sectors, certainly, again, I can give you the example from the air conditioning sector, which I used to work there. So PLIs have benefited air conditioning manufacturers, and now you see that this capacity ramp up that's happened quite distinctly as compared to a few years ago, where there's a lot more import that used to happen of the finished manufactured machines. That's helped. Similarly, PLI in textiles also is enabling. Now, that's one part of the coin where what can the government do? The other important part is what should the corporates do? What should the manufacturers think about? And my view there is clearly, I think, a lot more in terms of becoming more capital efficient and more self-sufficient in terms of can we invest, can we allocate capital without necessarily having to depend upon a government subsidy or a government incentive plan, because finally that's the real test that tomorrow, let's say, there was a time we used to have sales tax incentives across many states used to give for some backward areas or remote areas. And what did we find? After a while, after the incentive time horizon got over, a lot of those units were simply moved out. Now, if let's say the approach is to set up manufacturing in order to avail certain incentives, whether it was excise then or sales tax, then it will be fairly short duration, and that really is not going to create that +1 capability from a country standpoint. Versus, okay, fine, let's set up a capacity, let's set up a manufacturing capability basis the economics which will work. Over and above that, whatever incentives the governments have to offer, that really accelerates this journey. So I guess a little bit of change in orientation and change in thinking, and on merits, are we setting up something that's going to stay for and stick on for a longer period of time? It's something worth just considering as a thought.
Okay, very relevant points here. What I will do now is, since the time is limited, maybe few seconds to each one of you, and one common question. Though many points we have already discussed, what needs to be done, competitive advantage, China plus, the comparison. But 2-3 data points that I remember here is, which Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs has also been pushing very hard, that in last 10 to 11 years, we have seen a tremendous growth. We have more than 200 foreign companies in small, medium, large. Apple is the biggest one, has come to India. That is one. FII is putting more than 2,000 to 3,000 crore every day in the market. That is another data point that I can remember. More than 2,000 global capability centers are already operating in India, which has given jobs to almost 500 to 600,000 people in India. So the story is quite positive. But on the other side, despite having low interest rates, the CFOs are not going high on manufacturing. The private capex is very, very minimal. The push on the alternate credit is very high, but the private capex is not. So my question is, despite that positivity, the manufacturing is not happening at a large level from the CFO's end. What will motivate CFOs to make India or Bharat as a powerhouse in your view? Krishna, can start with you.
Yes, I think it is changing, Amol. I think at least from the experience in Henkel, I can tell it was not the case before. Now, more and more confidence has come to invest in India, because there is definitely a lot of positive case from the perspective of local consumption, but also the infrastructure development, etc. So it is definitely better than before, but we have not reached the level we should. I think the focus also, whenever we have discussion with the top management within Henkel, the main point from their side is, okay, how do we manage this regulatory complexity? And this complexity is also not changing fast. There are regulations which comes, and then it's required to be also implemented quickly. So from that perspective, as we already discussed, we should have a balanced approach, public, private, and how we can work together for a common cause of making India as an investment hub. And we are definitely proving our worth, and it's only going to increase from now on. So I'm very positive, and it's the right time also for India to really scale up. And you can already see many companies are investing, FIS are coming. And I can also tell from my experience within the company that the headquarters is much positive now.
Sure. So I just suggest just reflecting on two items here. Firstly, I guess CFOs in the Indian context, I think need to start becoming a bit more comfortable managing risks or dealing with risks, because it's a reality. A lot of what we talk about as risks or threats or exposures, now the more comfortable we become managing those risks, I guess that will give us that much more conviction in terms of being able to take that risk, and whether it's investment, whether it's managing capital. The second part is a bit more focus on governance, and how do we up the standards on the governance, corporate governance, and across the board, and help and facilitate those standards to get even better. Of course, there's a regulatory context here where especially listed companies, and different companies in the regulated sectors have their own sets to take care of. But generally, I guess these two are important enabling elements which then help take those capital allocation calls far more confidently, is how I would look at it.
So maybe, first, because just trying to get the whole global outlook, how it's coming into India, right? I mean, think about 3 examples here. One, India is trying to manufacture their first indigenous plane. And the world is looking at it if it truly can become the aviation hub. Because, of course, right? I mean, there's so much of backlog that someone like an Airbus and Boeing is struggling, given the brand. And that truly happened, right? Airbus partnered with one of the large conglomerate out of Baroda or Vadodara to make the first indigenous plane, right? The second is, I mean, we all know about TSMC and how strongly the world is trying to de-risk. If there were to ever be any invasion, then TMC becomes a threat, right? And how do you really start to de-risk? And India has been looked upon to build semiconductors, the entire value chain. So the point I wanted to make is that, look, the opportunities are there. The global brands are coming in, right? The investments are being made. One can compare points in time saying, okay, the FIIs are not investing enough. Or maybe the brands are not investing enough at a point in time. But the fact is, slowly, steadily, these investments are coming in. Yeah. So the dimension is changing. Of course, one may be aware of what all is happening because of, one may be present in that industry. But the fact is the dimension is changing. The second element is that you're seeing a lot of talent really show. So if you really think, and I don't know how many of the members here are from the IT sector or the tech sector, but truly today, India is building what you would call as tech-based companies. How many, maybe if you go back 5-10 years, and often when I talk to investors, I get this response, you wouldn't see a Zomato come up, right? You wouldn't see a Make My Trip come up. These are all tech-based platform companies. When you start to build tech-based platform companies, a lot of innovation is coming in, right? So I just wanted to also share that so much of that talent where you talk about engineer and engineering mindset, because no more it's about trying to build a software. It is about trying to build a product or a platform that can serve, right? You get into from a B2B to a B2C space. Yeah. Last but not the least, I think it's a mindset shift. We have to stop being servile and we have to be ambitious, aggressive in the world market. They are looking for it, and I think it's one for us to grab. Yeah. So my thoughts.
Certainly, that was truly meaningful. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. And as you said, dimension is changing. Let it change. Let it speed up. Let it accelerate. And the God of governments push it very hard. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts, and thank you so much for listening to us very, very patiently. Thank you.